Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Imagination Wednesday webinar series. Today, we are going to start by doing an introduction of the book Imagination Dilemma and going over a bit of the first chapter. And it's basically really about setting the tone for the rest of the webinar series. So before I start, I thought for those who don't know me, I would introduce myself. I'm Lydia. My background is as a social scientist. I got my PhD in political science, focusing on security policy. I have been a national security professional most of my career, and I am a systems thinker, something we will be returning to throughout this series. And I am a technology strategist and have a company called Abundance Studio where I consult on that. A little bit about my professional history. I have worked with the Department of Defense, US Special Operations, NATO, United Nations, as well as academia, MIT, and Oxford Business School. These are just some organizations I've worked with to kind of give you an idea of the types of organizations that seek me for my expertise around how to think about emerging tech in this moment in time. Great. So now, this is the webinar series. It's going to go through till the end of January, and it's going to cover every chapter and all the tools. So in chapter 1, there really aren't any tools. It's just about kind of introducing how technology can be democratized, what that means, what it looks like, and the 2 first principles of the book. And then starting the next webinar, we're going to get into the tools and examples and all of that. This is what it looks like. I will be putting the timings for each one a week or 2 ahead, but at least you have the dates. And so in today's, we're going to start with competitive imagination, why it's important, describing what the hyper super empowered individual looks like. That's you and me and everybody with access to the internet. And what a super empowered organization is having access to, and the second principle of the book, which is about like, what is your core business value proposition? So I open the book with this quote because I really think that it represents what I'm really getting at. And it is from Sheikh Mohammed from Dubai. And he says, the future belongs to those who can imagine it, design it, and execute it. And it is such an important quote that they have put it on the facade of the Dubai Future Museum, which you see in the picture here. And it has 2 other quotes in that facade, but this is one of them. And it is also etched in stone inside the lobby of the Dubai Future Museum if you ever go. And I like this one so much because we live in a moment where we require imagination more than any other moment in time. Specifically because science fiction is becoming science fact. And I'm going to give you some examples of this. So we are waiting for air taxis, and vertical takeoff and landing vehicles are slowly coming online. They exist in terms of a technology perspective, but regulation-wise, they're not yet in our daily lives. But this is something that we should start to see at the end of this decade become more and more of a thing where regulators have approved and found a way for them to be a part of our lives. So we soon will finally have air taxis. And then we are looking to go to space again, but this time not to just go and frolic and check it out, this time for real, to settle. And there are several countries around the world that are looking to do Mars settlements and moon settlements. And we're talking in our lifetime. And there are people on this planet right now who have had gene therapies. And these gene therapies can help reverse disease or cure disease. But the ones that are going through trials that are quite science fiction-y are the kinds that would, in essence, give us the fountain of youth that all of our human history has been talking about. And there are some people who have tested it, and one of them is a longevity biohacker called Brian Johnson, and he has done a follistatin one, which is for the muscles. But in essence, this kind of science fiction of reverse aging our body is slowly materializing in the scientific world. And hopefully it will become something we can see in our lifetime. Separately, humanoid robots is something that is very much in growing exponentially. And if you look at NVIDIA's latest conference, they had a whole bunch of different humanoid robots on stage. And if you look at the growth trajectory of them, it is exponential. And so we may have humanoid robots in our household or kind of fun pet ones like the one in this picture, but they're definitely very much becoming science fact. And these are just some examples. And this one is my favorite because it blows my mind. The Earth Species Project is actively working to be able to have intra-species communication. What that means is that our human species would be able to communicate with another species in their own language. And whales are at the top of their list for their research. And they expect to be able to do that next year. To give you an idea, whales have been communicating for millions of years through song, and they are able to communicate across oceans to each other. And we are at the cusp of, for the first time ever in history, to be able to intercept that conversation and take part in it. It obviously has a lot of ethical implications as well, but it could also bring a lot of positive aspects. For example, warning the whales about potential oil spills or other things. Many questions that need to be answered for sure. But the fact of the matter is that this is science fiction becoming science fact. And we do need to think very imaginatively about how we are going to deal with it. And when I say imagination, imagination is a form of critical thinking, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So not only are we having science fiction become science fact, but we are also seeing an increase in concurrent and converging perils, such as climate-related issues, global warming, the melting of the Arctic, tornadoes, wind, droughts, you name it. Zoonotic diseases on the rise, and the change in demographics, where it can create new opportunities, but it also creates some challenges, such as an elderly population that requires more medical care. And then because of climate change and conflict, we're seeing quite a few people become displaced. And one of the main issues is we have a global pandemic of loneliness. So basically, in other words, we've got a lot of imagining that we're going to have to be doing. And so I return back to this quote because it really builds. And so imagining is really just the first step. But you can't go on to design or execute anything if you haven't first imagined it. And that is the premise of the entire book, and the entire focus is that very first step. So one of the things that kind of got me curious about all of this is I have always been quite impressed every time I go for a oral hygiene appointment by how many tools they have. They've got tools for everything. And it's like the cleaning tool, but then you've got the power drill cleaning tool, and then you've got the sandblaster one, and then you've got all kinds of ways to get your cheeks out of the way. It's just so impressive at the number of things that they have to do their job. And I thought to myself, why don't we have that for imagination? Why don't we have like this toolbox of critical thinking tools that would be as varied as what the dentist has? And I see imagination not just as critical thinking, but a form of intellectual craftsmanship, where each person goes about it their own ways. But we still need structure in the way that we do it. And so that is the premise, basically, of the book and where it starts. So the first principle of the book is that when technology can do everything for you, what's left is imagination. And I see that as the competitive advantage, because if everyone has democratized access to technologies, then that levels the playing field. And so what's left is how they're leveraged, how those technologies are leveraged. And the second principle of the book is that properly defining what you are in the business of doing can open or close the imagination aperture and the ability to thrive through disruption. And I'm going to give an example later on of that. But let's go back to the first principle about how technology can do everything for you. And I am not the only person that is making this observation that technology is starting to become more and more democratized. All types of different things can be done that were never able to be done before by one person. And so Sam Altman has this bet with his friends. So I'm going to just read his quote. In my little group chat with my tech CEO friends, there's this betting pool for the first year that there's a one-person billion-dollar company, which would have been unimaginable without AI and now will happen. And so what he's talking about here, in essence, is the democratization of AI and what AI can do. Whether it's AI agents or the many AI tools we use in our lives, but basically you can have workflows that are entirely automated. And they are betting when will be the year that it'll happen, that there'll be a company that's run by one person with technology and it's valued at $1 billion. In fact, if you search online, one person billion-dollar company or something like that, you'll find that there's more and more articles about this topic because it clearly has piqued people's interest. All right, so I'm going to give just some examples of what democratized technology looks like for all of us. And so one is music. If you had ever wanted to compose music, but you just didn't even know, you've never studied music, you could do it now. If you wanted to write lyrics, but you just have no idea how to write lyrics because you don't even know how to match them with the music, that's not a problem today. And if you're like, you know what, I'm really into the music production aspect. And it's like, well, that's part and parcel of all of these tools today. And then you're like, okay, but where do I distribute my music? It's just so competitive out there. And it's like, well, there's technology for that. And in my book, I wanted to demonstrate that. And so I created a soundtrack for the book. And this soundtrack, you can find it on the YouTube channel and Spotify and all the places there are music because I had a distributor I'll explain to you in a second. But basically, I wanted to demonstrate this democratization of technology with this soundtrack of the book. And so what I did is I used Suno. There are several other organizations out there that also do the AI music component, but I just used Suno. You can use any other one. And I put in a prompt. I didn't write any lyrics. I put in a prompt, and I think they gave me like 200 characters or something like that. So I put in one sentence basically of the theme of each chapter, and the AI had to generate all the lyrics and the music. And there was times I specified what type of music I wanted, and there was times I didn't specify. What I thought is that it's truly fascinating from a philosophical perspective what the algorithm came up with. And you will find the lyrics to all the songs in the appendix of the book, or you'll find them on the YouTube channel. I've put on each one the lyrics. But I did not create the lyrics. I did not create the music. I did not produce the music. And I'm not a distributor. I don't have any kind of music industry connections. And so the composition and the writing of the lyrics and the production of it was all done by AI. And it took me around 12 to 14 hours to do the entire album. And then to distribute it, I used Unchained Music, which is a platform where you can upload your music and then it automatically distributes it to all the music distributors like Spotify and iTunes and all of that. And so it took me 15 minutes to fill out that form. I paid whatever the fee was, and I think it was like $25. And then off it went into the world of distribution. Now, this is something that is truly democratized because not only did I not have to have the skill, but I also didn't have to have the social capital and network to be able to do this. And so this is an incredible example of how AI and these distributing platforms have democratized the ability for anybody to produce music. And then I did not do this. However, if I really wanted to, I could have had custom vinyls available on demand through in the clouds. So for fun, I'm showing that to you, but it is incredible how much you can do as one person with the platforms that are available today. Another example is being a voice actor. So let's say you wanted to be the voice of a cartoon character or a gaming character, but you just don't have the appetite to like read or narrate or any of that. And maybe you just don't have the time and you just want to license your voice. And this is a new form of passive income that has never existed before, but is now existing today, thanks to technology. So here are some examples of companies that can do that, where you speak a certain amount of time and then they capture your voice and then they can replicate your voice. And then we have another one which is really interesting. It's called Listener. And so if you wanted to make a webinar or audiobook with your voice, but wanted it in other languages, but it would be your voice, you could use Listener to do that. And then we have acting. So pretend that you were just like too nervous to act, or you couldn't remember lines, or you just really don't like being in front of a camera, or you are an actor, you got all of that, but you just don't want to do your own stunts, and you want to license your likeness. You can do that. There are many technologies for that. And so I just want to show this example of Bruce Willis, because he was the first actor to license his likeness. And so this is some screenshots featured in it's a ad by a Russian telecommunications agency. And so that's that. But another example of that is Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn. And he used Hour One, which is a technology where you can create an avatar of yourself, and he created a digital twin of his body. Now, if you remember the digital twin of the voice, so he combined the body and the voice, and then he used all his ideas, which were available in print and in video, everything he's ever said, and he created a version of himself. And so he used that version to talk to himself, and it's just really fascinating. So he has several videos online of that. And then we have democratized technology when it comes to being an architect, which is super fascinating. So there's a company called Icon, and what they've done is they have created an AI architect where you can just say whatever it is you want, and it'll create a house for you. And then they have a 3D printer, which is the coolest part, because then you can 3D print the home that you've imagined. And I'm going to show you a picture of what I did. So this is one that I have prompted, and it has the floor plan and everything. And so my prompt was really around creating a house that you could have a garden on top of, where you could sustainably grow your own food. So then, now the publishing industry, that's a super fascinating one. So if you wanted to be an author, but you didn't have the connections to the publishing industry, or you just couldn't find your way to one of those big publishers, you can publish now on your own terms. And that has been democratized through Amazon Kindle Publishing and Ingram Spark. And Amazon truly disrupted the publishing industry, and because they have the reach from their platform, and they also have established the infrastructure for printing. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. But before that, fun fact, did you know that $1.25 billion worth of self-published books are sold every single year? That's a lot of money worth of self-published books. And there are many people's ideas that should be out there, and they have democratized that. And so I just kind of want to show a little bit about like the business model disruption of it. So we have the traditional book publisher revenue model, which is basically print the book and then sell the book, and then distribute it in a brick and mortar place, And the way that they go about that is they do a really huge PR launch ahead of the book. And the reason I put the launch in quotations is because it is such an outdated concept in an on-demand world. Because the traditional printing model is print tons of books and then you have them ready at brick and mortars to sell. But the thing is that that's also kind of a cash flow situation where you really need to get the money back for all the ones that you've already printed. And so that's how that model works. Print, then sell. But then on the on-demand digital publisher model, it is sell first and then print. And that is very unique because you don't have this kind of cash up front. So it's just a file and it's sitting, digital file, waiting for whoever buys it. So then you sell it and then you print it. Or then you sell it and then you allow digital access. And then you can even have a subscription to it. So it's a completely different model from the traditional publishing model. And then, so just a little comparison from the author side. From the author side, authors are constrained by how publishers have their rules, the way that their lengthy publishing processes are, and they don't get as much royalties compared to the other model. So in the other model, the on-demand digital publisher model, authors have full creative and distribution control, and they can exercise that at any moment in time. So for example, I have published through this mechanism, again, to demonstrate the democratization of technology. And I can go and change it. If, for example, I found a typo, I can go and fix that today. And then I can also stop the publication at any moment in time as well. So with the traditional book publisher model, it's a quite rigid and there's cash flow constraints versus the on-demand one, which Amazon Kindle Publishing has done, where they have a massive distribution. They have printing infrastructure all around the world. So if I ordered it here in the UK, it would print from a UK printer. If somebody ordered it in the US, the closest printer to them would be the one that would be printing it. And yeah, so that's that. And then another fun fact about the publishing world is just a few days ago, Taylor Swift announced that she was going to self-publish her own book. And this actually is an important thing because the traditional business publishers, they are increasingly relying on big name people to make a lot of their profit. And if those big name people are going to go away from the traditional publisher and go ahead and publish on their own, that completely threatens the existing publishing model. So just an example of that. So I want to show this graphic from Digital Leadership. I really liked it because it really helps show where we are, how we've got to where we are today. And I think it's important to understand that for context. So if we think back in time, like where, let's say, transformation and value came from, the core aspects of it at the beginning was survival. We just really needed to survive as a species. But then after that, it was really about control because we were able to survive. Then it was really about controlling the land, figuring out irrigation, figuring out how to harness animals to help plow the land. And so it was really about trying to control our environment. And then efficiency became really important. And this is where steam power and mechanized production started. And then when things really started to kick off is when electricity came along. And this is when things were able to be scaled because of electricity. So mass production and the telephone, and in the next webinar, we're going to talk about time-space compression, and the telephone contributed to that. And so in this sense here, the value was really about scaling. And then after that, we had consumption. So this is, now we're getting into the era that we most recognize. So the electronics, the internet was huge and forever changed things. And the internet also created new value where it didn't exist before because we were able to connect with each other in different ways. But ultimately where we are today is in the digitization phase. In this digitization phase It's about data. It's about Internet of Things being connected, and artificial intelligence and energy storage. Now, what is happening? So what's happening here is that new value is being created out of digital thin air. And I'm going to give you an example of this, just kind of so you get kind of where I'm coming from. So very analog, a sheepskin was traditionally put on beds. It helped people stay warm. And then the electricity came along. If you remember the graphs from before, electricity came along, and then all of a sudden, we were able to use our electric blanket on demand, push some buttons, and we were able to go from low heat to medium to high, and it was great. But then after that, we got the internet. And then the internet helped us have the smart blanket. And the smart blanket means that we can program whatever time it is we want to have our blanket be warm, and however warm we want. And that was pretty cool. We use an app. But the next version of this, the leveling up of it, is the cognitive blanket. And right now, I believe 8 Sleep is the only one of its kind like this. But basically, the leveling up is where you leverage data, artificial intelligence, sensors, and bespoke algorithms to be able to modify the blanket. It's not just a heating blanket, it's also a cooling blanket. And it will heat and cool you based on your body's temperature, based on the temperature of the room. And it's also going to wake you up with heat or cooling as you like. And if you're snoring, it will help you not snore. And it does all these things, all with algorithms. So it's come a long way since the sheepskin, basically. But this is basically new value that has been created that's never existed before. So if we just go back to this slide here, the important thing to realize is that when the internet came along, we have changed a lot of the ways that we create, deliver value. And so I want to show you this chart. So when I think about the digital economy, I think about it in this way, in terms of many different systems that are on top of it. Now you see the one at the bottom, that's energy. So we can think about it as the electricity. So you remember when it was like electricity was the new invention. Well, since then, we have put on top of electricity all these other things. We've put the internet, we have space infrastructure, so computation, we have cloud, hardware, software, distributed ledger, data, algorithms, payment systems, and APIs. We have done so much since electricity has come along, and so much more since the internet has come along. And when we think about how business models are being disrupted, it is important to keep in mind all these systems at play. We're not going to talk too much about them, but I will be bringing it up through the webinar series. And eventually, so systems thinking is needed for this. And in the chapter 5, we're going to talk about the technology butterfly effect, where I'll help you see how to better understand how technologies converge together and how to anticipate where new value is being created where it never existed before. Separately, in chapter 3, I talk about the many different macro trends that interplay with the different systems of our digital economy. And I just want to show you this graphic. I have it at the back of the book because this is so important to me. I use this to kind of understand and connect the dots of the different things that are converging. So this is going to be a graph that I will be showing throughout the webinar series, but I just wanted you to see it now. All right. So let's talk about the empowered organization. Now we talk about protecting the economic moat. And so we talked about the individual, how the individual is becoming super empowered, can do all these things they weren't able to do before. But now we also have organizations that have both positive aspects and negative aspects to deal with this. So the negative aspects is that the hyper-empowered individual has more capability, more access, more autonomy, more agency, more reach, and doesn't necessarily need some of the services that companies are offering. And so that means a bit of a financial loss. And then on the other side, super empowered organizations are using AI agents, consolidated clouds. They need less resources comparatively to before, less human talent, and low and no code. Some of this means that companies that were B2B servicing other companies may find themselves with less business or no business because some of these tools can do what they did for them before. And then, but on the positive side, the low code and no code allows organizations to kind of speed up and create faster. So what's the new business model? A lot of that depends on the industry, and a lot of that is being created as we go. So I'm going to just pose some questions. So basically, what do publishing companies offer authors who can self-publish and distribute globally at the click of a button? And it is incumbent on every organization to look at these disruptive technologies and tell themselves that the value chains are changing. And so they need to revisit and reevaluate what it is they're in the business of doing and how they offer value. So another question here is, what do customer service support companies offer when AI can handle most of the work? So an example of this is Salesforce. They recently announced their Agent Force, which is an AI platform where you can have customer service that's AI. And it really sounds like a human, it responds to human conversation, and it's connected to organizational systems in the back end. And so it can offer quite a bit of value in terms of customer support and customer services. And it can be done in most languages at any time of the day, and it can scale to as many customers as needed. So these are interesting ways that new business models are getting created, but also disrupted at the same time. Okay, so what is happening? Basically, every single company has been leveled up and the moats are drying out. They've been leveled up because we all have access to the same technologies. And the moat, in other words, the moat is the business defensibility of a company that protects it. So whatever protected it before, right now is not going to be protecting it as much as it was before. And I'm going to give you an example. So this is another Sam Altman story, and I really liked it because I think it's very easy to understand. So basically, in an interview, he was asked, they said to him, listen, you said that OpenAI is going to bulldoze all other companies. And he said, like, why? Like, explain that. And he said, well, it's not that, we want to bulldoze other companies. It's just that if you are betting against AI improving, then you are going to find yourself struggling. And I'm paraphrasing here. But basically, artificial intelligence is getting better and better exponentially. And so what people think that can't be done by AI will most likely be able to be done by AI. And the example he gives is the flashlight app. And so he said, so if you remember a long time ago when phones came out, there was a flashlight app that you could download and you could use your phone as a flashlight. But the thing is that eventually this became part of the operating system software. And so flashlight apps were no longer necessary because it was part of the software of the phone. It was part of the operating system. And so basically what he was saying is that you should be worried if your company is going to go the way of a flashlight app. If your company and what your company offers can be done as a plugin or something else, or that AI is going to be able to do it automatically, that it won't be relevant in the future. And so it is incumbent on organizations to really think about if their company is going to be a flashlight app or is going down the trajectory of being one. Which brings me to principle number 2 of the book. Properly defining what you are in the business of doing can open or close the imagination aperture and the ability to thrive through disruption. So what I mean by that is how you see yourself and what it is you're really offering. And the way that I like to explain this is using Kodak. And everyone's very familiar with the Kodak story, but this is a new version of the same story, but through the lens of imagination. So the core business, or what Kodak saw themselves to be in the business of doing is print photography, film and print photography. And so in that sense, when they were looking at their business innovation and growth, they were looking at film innovation, print manufacturing innovation, and photo ink innovation. Now, if we took that exact same story, but through the lens of imagination, we imagined that what they were offering was a bit different, and that instead of being in the business of print and film photography, that they were instead in the business of memory preservation, that they were in the business of preserving the memories of the baby's first step, of the wedding, of the moments that people cherish, then if that's what their core business model was, then digital cameras, NFTs, whole brain emulation uploads, holograms, VR, avatars, volumetric video, all of that would have been part of their aperture of what it was they were in the business of doing. And so they would have been able to look at new technologies with a different light, with a different perspective. And so and I would label this as their imagination dilemma, that they were not able to imagine themselves differently. So the business defensibility question, what are you really in the business of doing? And I think more and more people need to answer that as AI starts to come more and more into our lives. An example of this is one person I talked to, she works on AI, and she was saying that in her company, she is creating the algorithms that are going to replace her and her team. And she said that to me with like a face of bewilderment and a little bit of concern as well. And I said to her, okay, so what would you do after that? I mean, we all need to think about the value. What are we really in the business of doing? So today you're doing that. What are you doing tomorrow? And I had we also need to upskill too. But this goes back to the reimagining ourselves and what it is that we offer. And I have a friend who works in bioinformatics, and the job he was doing 15 years ago has been replaced by robots and algorithms. And that job, he paid the bills and his mortgage on that job. And he has upskilled, and he is now looking at metabolomics and mRNA and all these other kinds of aspects of bioinformatics that are different to what he was looking at before. So we all must grow and reimagine what it is we do in light of change. So I'll give an example of me. What is a strategist in the business of doing? So in the book, I provide tons of generative AI prompts that you can use to use the critical thinking tools that I give to do my work. And so to me, I don't see myself as doing that analysis. It's how I do that analysis from this perspective. It's the context. That is what I'm in the business of doing. I am in the business of providing context. And context for the individual organization, understanding their organization and their market, but also kind of the culture, the human aspects. And so I provide context to the individuals or teams in a way that resonates with them. And then I do so in a way that's competitive and anticipatory. And so that's how I see what I am in the business of doing. So what are you really in the business of doing? This webinar series will help you answer that question through 4 facets of imagination and many other tools. And so this is our journey. So we are in part 1 of the book. Part 1, we have the imagination hurdles. The next one, we're going to talk about exponentiality, how it's mind-boggling. And then after that, we're going to talk about the global state of polycrisis, how to be able to manage and understand risk with so many different states of polycrisis. And then after, we're going to get into the meat of the book, which is the facets of imagination. There are 4 that I have identified: identity, convergence, humanity, and dreams. Identity is, I already kind of intro that to you with the Kodak example. It's about understanding our identity, our professional identity, our organizational identity, and being able to create space for that identity to shape and evolve. And then we have convergence, which is really technological convergence. And I'm going to talk about something that I call the technology butterfly effect. I love it. I think it's really great to understand how technologies converge, how infrastructures converge, and they create new value. And then humanity facet of imagination, leaning into our humanity, and dreams. Dreams is the most powerful act of imagination, and we should never take that for granted. And yes, there are tools for that as well. And then I offer the telescope framework because this is a framework I've developed so that you can individually understand and develop your own personal imagination. And I call it the framework, the telescope framework, because a telescope has many lenses that you see through. And our imagination also has many lenses through which we imagine through. And so I'm not going to spoil it, but that's what we'll talk about. And then finally, we're going to conclude the webinar series at the end of January with the future of imagination. And it is a bit wild. Co-imagining with AI, whole brain emulation, agentic imagination. I'm going to talk about the role of our embodied experience, which I think plays a huge role in imagination. And then the future of the facets of imagination. And so the next webinar is November 6th. And what you can expect from it is we're going to talk about what exponential curves look like, examples of them. We're going to talk about the time-space compression, how technology has compressed time and space and continues to do so. And then the 3 tools that we're going to look into are the 6 Ds of exponential growth, adoption curves, and S-curves. And I hope you'll come. And I thought I would end this webinar with the song of this book, of this chapter of this book. And it's called What Are You in the Business of Doing? And you can just scan that QR code or go to the YouTube channel and find it. And then finally, if you want to work together or want me to speak at your event, just reach out. I'd love to hear from you and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, everyone.